Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of the CHA annual conference. I hope you've all gotten a good night's rest, that you had a good time in the evening reception yesterday, and that you're ready for today's program. Yesterday we started with an icebreaker. We had a bigger crowd. We all expressed our interest. Now we're a bit of a smaller group of people, but I think we can still make more noise than we did yesterday since we've had some experience. So are you ready? Yes, there you go. Good. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ida Maria Tammi. I'm a visiting researcher at the Center for Humanitarian Action. I'll be moderating and hosting the first sessions of today. Yesterday, we kicked the conference program off with a keynote dialogue between Nisreen El Saim and Dr. Hugo Slim. Afterwards, there was a panel discussion on loss and damage and an active session, which is a big part and a core component of our conference this year. And the first active session explored the meaning of allyship and the limits of collaboration between humanitarian and other communities in responding to climate change. Today, our program follows a somewhat similar structure. We'll start with 3 hot takes from yesterday's discussion. Afterwards, there'll be a panel discussion on climate change, fragility, vulnerability, and violence, and an active session on priorities, needs, and necessities. But before I get to the program itself, there's a couple of organizational things to mention. Some housekeeping rules, just so that you all know the sessions on the main stage will be both streamed online as well as recorded. There are live captions available for those who need them. You can see them on the screen here. As well as online, you can access them through the stream text function. Also, online participants have the chance to ask questions and comments to panelists and other speakers. You can do this through the Q&A function on your screens. And if you post on social media, please use hashtag CHA24. In addition to this, we are committed to making this year's conference, as all CHA events, sensitive to discrimination. For this reason, we have awareness guidelines, which are available on the posters around the venue, as well as on our conference website. We have an awareness person, my colleague at CHA, Goda, who is available here throughout the conference, and you can also reach her through, I think, WhatsApp and email. Her contact details are, again, on the posters and on the conference website. And finally, there's the bingo. As you can see on the chairs here, the same thing as yesterday, there's bingo cards. The point of this game, Buzzword Bingo, is to become a bit more aware of our language use, the amount of jargon and buzzwords we introduce in our communication with others, and be a bit more mindful about that. So the way you play this game is that you listen carefully, you mark down the words that you hear, and the aim is, hopefully at the end of the day and not after the very first session or my opening remarks, to get 5 in a row. Diagonally, horizontally, or vertically. For those who manage to do so, there's a small prize for you at the info desk. If and when you do get bingo, please do not shout up and jump. But we will check up on you at the end of each session to see how that is going. And if you want to play but don't have a sheet, there's more at the info desk. There's the conference website you can access through QR code. I think it's also on the program, where you can get all the latest information on the speakers and where the different sessions are taking place, as well as the Wi-Fi. All the details are on the program. So that's it for the boring part. Now let's get to the good things. I would like to invite Dr. Abdullah Fahimi to join me on stage for the 3 hot takes. You can come this way. So good morning, Abdullah. You have a microphone here. So that you know, I will briefly introduce Abdullah to everybody. He's a research fellow at the Center for Climate and Foreign Policy at the German Council on Foreign Relations. Abdullah's various research interests include energy transitions, climate and energy policies in developing countries, geopolitics of sustainability transitions, and the role of international aid organizations, particularly in developing countries. So it should make for an interesting conversation. We'll hear from the representative, I'd imagine, of the climate community. Do you have a blue dot or a red dot on your... You have a blue dot. So Abdullah has kindly promised to share his thoughts and opinions, or if you may, 3 hot takes from yesterday's sessions with us today. So good morning, Abdullah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
So what did you think of yesterday's discussions?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation yesterday. I really found the conference a rich conference, interesting, and also fulfilling the promise of breaking silos in terms of bringing together people from humanitarian sector. Of course, the humanitarian sector was a bit bigger than the rest, from policy makers, but also academia. So I found these sessions and also the active session very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's an important observation what you say, that there's still more humanitarians than climate community representatives here. And this is interesting because we made a concerted effort to invite both communities, and still we ended up with more humanitarians on the site today. And I think this really speaks to the need of fostering more collaboration, creating stronger networks, and getting acquainted with each other. So it's really great that you're then now here sharing your insights.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, it's understandable. It's a humanitarian conference. So, but the effort can be seen also in the participants, but also in the panels. The mix of speakers from different sectors.
Yeah. And so, if you had to pick 3 points or 3 things that stood out to you from yesterday's discussions, what would they be?
Yeah, so that I don't forget those 3 important things. I made some notes, and so the 3 hot takes are from the keynote dialogue, the panel on loss and damage, and also the active session. So one hot take from the keynote dialogue was that the humanitarian organizations or the sector's mandate is changing. For me, that was yeah, I mean, for most of you, probably this is common knowledge, but that this is changing because of the more frequent and more severe climate-related disasters. And if you compare the humanitarian works today with the works from 20 years ago, now more and more humanitarian organizations need to include and even put climate on top of their agenda when working in these settings that they usually work. So yeah, that the mandate for climate for humanitarian organizations is changing. That was the first hot take from the keynote dialogue. From the loss and damage panel, I really liked Dr. Coco Warner. Yeah. Coco Warner's statement that we need to be prepared to fundamentally change our lifestyles, that we do not rely only on technological fixes, but also need to really change how we consume things, how we behave, and so it's a really fundamental change. I liked that from her part, but also Sebastian Lesch's comment that in the face of the, I mean, given that there are now an increasing number of climate funds, it is very important that a fund like loss and damage, which is not yet operational, is now dedicated to a particular case or use, so that there is no duplication. That was also for me very interesting. Yeah, and from the active session, I was at the active session number 3, climate science and humanitarian organizations. For me, what stood out was that effective communication is key for increased collaboration between these two, or the broader collaboration between different sectors. So yeah, I could go on later if you want.
Good, thanks. And I do actually want you to go on later because I was at the same session as you were in the one on collaboration between humanitarian action and climate science communities, and I found that very interesting. There were lots of opportunities identified, also some challenges, and I would like to go into a bit further into detail on these with you, being also a representative of the science community yourself. But maybe to pick up on your earlier point where you mentioned Coco's point that in responding to climate change, it is not only these kinds of technological fixes on superficial measures that are enough, but we also need more fundamental change. And this, I think, reflects the conversation that's going on, or maybe emerging within the humanitarian community as well, that climate change requires us to re-examine the norms and the principles and the values and the kind of bigger systemic issues as well. It's a cross-cutting theme that requires many fundamental changes. And one of these changes is maybe new forms of allyship. One of the things that was mentioned in the climate science session yesterday that stood out to me is the different kinds of temporal frameworks with which science communities and the humanitarian communities operate within. Humanitarian work tends by nature to be short-term, very reactive, very rapid response, as it should be, and then climate or science communities in general tend to operate more slower. It's a longer time span of data collection, processing, getting published, getting the information out there and getting it validated through other research. Do you have any insight on how to bring these two temporal frameworks together? Do you consider this to be an issue?
Yes, I do. I think that it is an issue, of course, but that I would have proper solutions to solve this really important issue. I don't think I have those, but I mean, in the session it was discussed that how much there is the need for these two sectors to interact, to learn from each other, to contribute to the works of each other. So there is that really strong need for that, but also at the same time you need to take into account exactly how you say that the humanitarians need to respond rapidly and the time frame is shorter. There, I mean, again, it comes then to the hot take that I presented, like the communication. So if the researchers and climate science groups they produce knowledge and content and make it available to the humanitarian organizations in such a way that it is understandable, it's not in their own language and jargon, which is sometimes, and there was this also term someone threw in the circle there, that translatability or untranslatability, that your work needs to be translated into in other groups that they can also understand this. So I think part of the issue could be addressed with better communication, but I should say I'm not an expert in that regard.
Yeah, when you mentioned this, making it available, I think it's a two-way or a two-dimensional issue. On the one hand, you need the institutional structures and the channels through which you can reach out to the other community. They need to be in place for the collaboration and discussion to be effective and continuous. And at the same time, I feel that it's also a personal issue. We're all very busy in our daily lives, focusing on what are our primary tasks and keeping that going. So it's very difficult then to find time to reach out to new colleagues and to kind of broaden the scope of our activities. So then it's also a personal issue on how we organize our days and how we prioritize this kind of new way of collaborating. There was another point I wanted to touch upon and make use of having you here on the stage with me. I know that you've been doing research on energy transition so the shift towards green and sustainable energy in fragile settings, particularly in Afghanistan. And I'd be interested to hear a little bit more what you found out there, because in what we know now from research is that there's a certain donor reluctance to fund, for example, adaptation projects in fragile and vulnerable settings. There's a perception that they're difficult to implement when you have such volatile context. And I wonder if you have any insight on how these big infrastructural projects have been going in, I think, Afghanistan in this particular case.
Yes, sure. So that was a part of my doctoral research, and you're absolutely right, and that there is this reluctance among the donor community, and there was also a comment by a speaker yesterday that conflicts then just take more attention from the more infrastructural projects. In the context of Afghanistan, after the takeover of the Taliban in 2021, most of the development organizations withdrew and stopped their works there, and only humanitarian actors are there on the ground and delivering humanitarian services mostly, but not climate action measures or usually not significant climate related projects or energy projects or developmental projects. In these settings, from what I researched, these are unique and different from the settings in Western Europe or elsewhere, that in these settings it's very difficult and costly to implement projects. Usually these countries, not always, usually they are on the front line of climate change. For example, Afghanistan is the 5th, or according to some reports, the 6th most vulnerable country to climate change. Corruption is high, low capacity in the government. More frequent, more severe droughts and floods. So all of these combine and make for a really not welcoming situation that you would want to implement projects in. So, but there is the need. I mean, there is also the reports and scientific reports also indicate that there is a correlation between conflict and climate change. So, I mean, conflicts take attention, most of the attention, but with climate change projects, you do have a chance, even if small, to contribute to prevention of conflicts or solution. Yeah, it's very difficult actually to research, but also implement projects in these settings. But it is really much needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's very important what you say about climate risks and hazards often converging with other types of vulnerabilities present in the society. For example, armed violence and its consequences, and recognizing that these are difficult projects to implement. They may be more costly, like you say. Is there some value added that you would see by more engaging the humanitarian or the aid community in general in these efforts?
Absolutely. From the active session number 3 that I attended yesterday too, I mean, we learned that active climate science or scientists and researchers need or can learn a lot from humanitarian actors on the ground, because they have the expertise, they have, in most cases like Afghanistan, they have access to data, to people, to the real situation there. So these can then feed into scientific reports and improve the quality of our work. But in Afghanistan or similar settings, it's also very important that, to know that these are sometimes the only actors on the ground, and they can implement also projects. Now, some of the I've learned that some of the humanitarian actors in Afghanistan are also implementing smaller scale projects. So that I think that cooperation between the two is very much needed.
Yeah, I think it's a very important point, and we, in the humanitarian community, there's already a lot of talk on adaptation and how this can be streamlined with humanitarian projects, how humanitarians can contribute towards improving the adaptability of social and other structures towards climate change. But maybe the link between humanitarian action and mitigation has been left a bit on the side. We talk about greening of aid and reducing the carbon footprint of aid organizations in their own operations, but it sounds like there's a lot more there to be explored.
Even, if I may, even in the mitigation side, in settings like Afghanistan or similar settings where the access to energy is very low, so these countries would naturally or would want to improve the access to energy for their population, and they could either implement renewable energy projects or fossil-based projects. So that is also a mitigation of future emissions. So that, I mean, you could also look at it as a mitigation. So, of course, most of these settings are always discussed in the context of adaptation, but mitigation also. In Afghanistan, for example, 30% of the population have access to reliable energy or grid, the electricity grid, and this is not very different in most other conflict settings in Asia or in Africa. So there is also that mitigation element there too.
Yeah, and this, what you just raised, speaks directly to the question of better linking humanitarian action with development issues and these kinds of long-term processes, which of course then require a certain kind of infrastructure and measures in place. I think we're gonna finish our conversation here and continue with the next panel. Thank you so much, Abdullah, for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.